Welcome back for this week's edition of The Informed, and as usual we've got the A-team lined up. We've got Mario Beeks, author of Blood and Soil and security consultant. We've got John Heron, victims advocate solicitor. We've got Caroline Council, one of Australia's leading lawyers, and we've also got the Shadow Minister for Planning, Ryan Smith. Good morning, team.
Morning.
Good morning.
Now we're here to talk all things budget, all things election coming up. We spoke about the budget last week. Leading into it, it was basically the starting gun for the budget. And I want to kick off today with listening to the ministers being asked specifics about the budget. If I hear we'll have more to say on that in a few weeks, I'm going to scream at the television. What is the go with that? Why are they so secretive about it?
Isn't it about keeping their tinder dry until the actual campaign is underway rather than the faux campaign?
Yeah, I think that's right, Carolyn. I think as the campaign kicks off, after the announcement of when it's going to kick off, I think the different parties want to be able to make their big announcements so it's clear in people's minds when they go to the polls. People go about their daily lives. If you're making announcements too early, they don't stick, I don't think, in people's minds. So they want to make sure that these announcements are as recent as possible when it comes to people going to vote.
It's a valid point, Ryan. I tend to agree with what you're saying, yeah.
Ditto, so I've got nothing to add to that.
Is this a little bit, though, of stopping people looking into what's actually being said and what's being offered? So if I don't give people enough time to do their due diligence on what they have to say on it, does it make it harder or easier for the voting public, us included in that, to actually make a real choice? Is this about Albanese making himself as small a target as possible, or should he actually be trying to win this with some decisive, reformist type real choice? Because I'm confused as to what he is actually running on here.
Sorry, John, go.
That's all right. I'm probably someone he stands for nothing, really. He just be blunt about it. He's had a makeover, and I think at this stage he's following the Kevin Rudd book of Small Target. Now that's revealing as little as possible. Then there's a physical makeover as well. But let's look behind the character himself. Let's look at I'm big on the work history of these politicians. So he's worked for 6 months of his life as a union organiser, which is a catch-all thing, and he's worked for the ALP. How can someone like that, with that experience, that would struggle to find a job, be considered to be Prime Minister? I'll just be blunt about that. That's my view on it.
You're spot on, John. I want to say this, as a citizen of this country, and past 2 years, there was not many politicians on TV, particularly Albanese. My problem, it is, as you say, doesn't matter how much spin he puts about his unhappy childhood and, living in House Commission and all these things. It's very difficult for him to present himself as a future Prime Minister. So, I agree with you, John, what you say. And the difficulty for me is to understand where he was past 2 years, except I'm seeing that he lost weight and he worked on his, physical appearance rather than just being in politics.
My thoughts are he's been in Parliament for over 20 years. He's been attached to government. He's been a minister. I would have expected him to have more of a vision for Australia. It's not like I look at politics a fair bit, obviously, from my role, but I have no idea what he stands for. I mean, I think if you, putting aside the fact he hasn't had a job outside of politics, you'd think at least being in the roles that he has been in Parliament, including, as I said, being minister, that he would have put some sort of structure together in his mind about where he would like to see Australia, and I haven't heard him articulate that at all.
And they really needed beige after Shorten. It was a case of a complete misstep in the last electoral campaign by Labor. They needed somebody just to keep that seat warm, and they needed somebody that wasn't going to be provocative, somebody that wasn't going to be a target. I agree. He's trying to make himself the smallest target imaginable. The problem is when you stand for nothing and when you haven't enunciated what your future is for Australia, you end up, as happened this morning on the front page of one of the Western Australian newspapers, being Albanese in the vein of being John Malkovich. Who are you? Who is the multiple facets of Albanese? What do they want us to see versus what is actually there? And that's the problem. And I don't think the Australian voting public is going to buy it. I think we're too cynical as a nation. We're just not going to buy into this.
Look at him when he's put on the spot, as far as having some media questions. I'll just pick two of them out. So the thing with electric cars, apparently in a year or two, we're going to have solar panels and go home and plug our cars and charge them overnight. That was one. He commented, was asked about the Solomon Islands. We've discussed that situation on the program before. It's quite complex. And the answer was Chinese bases are going in the Solomon Islands because of climate change. Right? So that's the Mickey Mouse stuff. If I was in a politics class in first year uni, the class would erupt in laughter. So I think we're down to the situation again where the Australian public is again, unfortunately, this comes back to the voters, they're choosing to not vote someone rather than voting for someone that stands for something.
Yeah, and I think, while the government has not been without these sort of issues, the whole circumstances surrounding Kimberley Kitching and the lack of willingness from Albanese to step forward and take those issues on the chin and work through them. I think that the dead bat that he played just showed a lot about his character. He had an opportunity, as I said, given that the government's had issues around these sort of circumstances as well, he had an opportunity to be a real point of differentiation and he completely squibbed it.
That's going to be better for him. Yeah, yes, Joe, Ryan. Yes, you're absolutely right. Sorry.
No, that's okay, Mario. I was just going to, misquote Shakespeare and say there's something rotten in the state of Canberra. We know that the way that those political animals are operating is not the healthiest way to work, and it doesn't engender the healthiest workplace. So why not step forward? Why try to disappear into the shadows on that issue? I think it was a huge opportunity lost. Instead of rallying for sustainable change, meaningful change to create a better place to work, he went and hid. I agree. Sorry, Mario.
No, that's fine. I just want to, relating to what John said, I saw yesterday the press conference, Albanese and Mark McGowan I believe in the Perth, and some of the constituents want to ask a question, and he bluntly refused to answer. He says, "You're not a journalist. This is press conference." When the politicians avoiding being asked question of constituents, and after all, you want to be the prime minister, that's a sign of the worry. When you don't want to answer the question which is not prepared for you earlier. I'm not a politician. I don't know how the thing's been done behind the scene, but it's obvious that Albanese will try to avoid, and as Ryan says, being the smaller target rather than being there up front and say the things everybody expecting to hear it. About that lady, what was her name, Kitching, and I think that's going to hunt him down badly in these elections.
Now,
Yeah, it's a case of, again, from what Mario said, we all know that's a fact, that he's unable to answer questions on the spot. I don't know how he's going to go on question time. What will international leaders think of Australia? Probably not a great deal. And Caroline quotes some literary examples there. I could quote Shakespeare and "Mislike me not for my complexion." Well, he's taken that on board. Or if you're a fan of Sun Tzu, this is his strategy, which is, let your enemy make mistakes and I'll just sit there. Now, to be a leader on the international stage, this is a very important time in history.
Absolutely.
Right, really important time for real leaders to speak up that have got spines, backgrounds. Even in the Ukraine situation, Albanese came out, obviously with pre-prepared comments, really not, without understanding. You can see he couldn't understand that particular situation and talked about aggression, etc. at that time. But again, how can you handle that on the world stage? I'm baffled.
Have Labor capitalised on Morrison's shortcomings? Have they done enough to differentiate themselves with any policies? Because I can't see it. This seems to be getting dragged further and further into the lowest form of personality politics the closer we get to having a date for the election. Will it turn around? Will there be some substantive policy differentiation between these two, or will it get worse, do you think?
Well, you hope that there's going to be some policy differentiation and some vision, because the reality is, unfortunately for Morrison, I guess my side of politics is both leaders are not displaying anything that anyone could aspire to. I think that, Albanese has a great opportunity here to show some charisma and drive and ambition for the country, but because Morrison is on the nose with people, a lot of people don't think that he himself is carrying any of those qualities. But all Albanese is smaller, and I'm not sure. I mean, I think that Morrison's a relentless campaigner. I think he's going to pull out all stops. He'll make what announcements he feels he needs to make in order to secure the role. But Albanese, I'm not sure he has anything to offer, because he has an opportunity to offer it, and he's just not taking that opportunity. So it just leaves me to wonder what he has.
Yep.
Sorry, we're 4 to 5 weeks out, depending on when we go, whether it be the 21st or 26th of May for the announcement. The polls, do we trust them at the moment? Will they move substantially? Are there undecided voters, which I'm still one? In order of transparency, I am unsure at the moment which way I will go on the day. So will anything change between now and then?
I'm a big fan of I used to be, of watching the betting markets in regards to their odds in politics. That being said, because the pure mathematics of that is people put their own money out there. Right? Yeah. So, but with recent issues or events like Donald Trump and Brexit, they're absolutely blown out of the water. A few other localised elections. Brazil was another big international one. At the moment, they have Morrison at about 3.5 versus 3.2 for Albanese. Now, mathematically, that's an unassailable lead. And it's the state Victorian Liberal Party has got far better odds at the moment on that space. They're at about 2.9 in closing, so well done, Ryan. But you're moving in the right direction. The important thing is that that's moving in the right direction, whereas Morrison's going in the opposite direction.
Yeah, and we've got time on our side too, to some degree. But yeah, with 5 weeks to go, you're right. It is. You'd be very concerned. And as I said, he is a relentless campaigner. The polls in the last federal election clearly put him behind, and he managed to steal a victory. So I think I couldn't say what I think the outcome's going to be, but I do agree with you. We do look at sports bet as a better indication than the published polls.
Yeah, there's polls and lies, and damn lies. So I think polls aren't what they used to be in terms of predictability. I think Morrison's going to have to carefully script who he speaks to and where he goes, though. There was that very angry pensioner confronting Morrison at
Tasmania, right? Yes.
And Morrison was caught like a deer in the headlights, or a rabbit in the headlights, I should say. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, and he tried to then pass this gentleman off to one of his advisors to speak to, but it backfired spectacularly. And that's when the gentleman got riled and started swearing. So I think Morrison is definitely going to watch where he campaigns, and I think it'll be a lot more scripted and contained and controlled. He doesn't want too many more of that sort of naked truth being exposed in the media, if you will.
It's a hard circumstance. I mean, I've had people at markets and things like that on an odd occasion be very aggressive. If you weren't in the public eye, you would probably be aggressive back and shut it down. But it's very hard in those circumstances when someone is coming full on and you try to reason. And I actually watched that clip just before we met today. But, I think he was trying to say, look, I've got someone here who can look after you and deal with your problem and I'll talk to you. I've got other obligations here at the moment, but, you can't sort of do much when you find yourself in those circumstances. So it does lead, because of the naked, I won't say aggression, but passion, it does lead a politician to say, well, I'm not going to meet the public because I just can't control it. And I don't want to put myself in a circumstance where, the cameras are catching me not being able to do anything in a circumstance where most of us would probably react in a completely different way other than just let it all wash over us.
I think they could have. I think they could have some collaborative training. They instead of literally standing there staring and nodding, they really need to be able to turn that around and listen to the complaint being made, but also to identify with what the individual's saying. Otherwise, you don't greet and meet the public, and that will become very obvious to the public that it is being scripted.
I give Scott Morrison credit because regardless of he's right or wrong, and he does good or bad since fires in 2019 till today, is one of the politicians who coughs a lot of publicly. Doesn't matter, as you remember, when it was the fires, people refused to shake his hands, and he is being exposed to the angry, public. But as I say, I give him credit because he didn't shut down the people. He didn't avoid it. He tried to calm down, of course, and backfire him, as Caroline says. But I give him credit because he's upfront with this one.
Right.
Will Albanese make it? Will Albanese make it credit on this one? Very, very hard, because it's difficult today. Scott Morrison coughs not just because as a head of the Commonwealth, but for the all premiers in all other states as well, because people are going to release their frustrations and their anger on him because he's there at this very moment. So I give him credit for that one.
Yeah, at the local level, being a candidate in the federal election. So what do I see with the local candidates? Let's say the current sitting Labor member, he's using photographs 10 years old, which has really prompted me to come and dye my hair potentially. I'll think about that one. And he's been, where he wasn't on the hustings for about the last 3 or 4 elections, but now he's everywhere. Sporting events. They seem to delight in handing out checks of other people's money. And I pointed out on Kilmore Radio the other day, that's not other people's money. That's my money. That's the money of other constituents. So that's the mindset of these people. So they're out there putting out a projection of themselves. They certainly have put out the sandwich board and like the local member, Albo made him walk up and down the Hume Highway with a red sandwich board saying, here's $150 million for a highway. And I don't think David Limbrick would make me do that. I hope not. But at the local level, they seem to be pulling out all stops, which is, you talk about beating markets and polls. That's a bigger indication, I think, of their own polling and concern. So it's not all over yet.
We haven't seen the vote buying yet. We haven't seen where the pork barrelling is going to go. Do you think, given we've had the regional funds and the black spot and the infrastructure, the digitisation going, that hasn't been announced as to where it's actually going to go yet. Will that change things for us? Because self-interest is a wonderful motivator. Will we see that being able to swing things at all for either party?
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, you get votes by appealing to people, and if people in an electorate want certain infrastructure or services delivered and you deliver them or you promise to deliver them, then they're going to lean towards you. I mean, that's the name of the game, isn't it? That's what we want in our individual communities. We want our tax dollars spent on our backyard.
It'll be interesting to see what's going to look like in Victoria this year, state elections. How this is going to look like, and how this is going to appeal to the public. I'm curious.
I can, being on the hustings again, Mario,
yes.
The flavour and mood of the population is completely different towards the Andrews regime at the end of the year. there are people that are, as I said before, lukewarm on Morrison, but they're keeping the baseball bats lined up in the cupboard at the end of the year.
I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like it.
The only thing
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I was at a community. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say the same thing. It is like I've never seen such anger towards one man in my life, and I'm obviously I'm speaking my book, but I have to say the published polls do not give me they don't line up with what all me and my colleagues are hearing, and I'm not just talking in my electorate. I've been, Ballarat, western suburbs, southeastern suburbs, you name it. I'm hearing this everywhere.
And I think that's going to be that correlation between the Andrews and Albanese on these elections. It's going to be crucial because, one representing each other is going to reflect the votes in Victoria, and I believe in other states as well. Maybe I'm mistaken.
One thing we haven't discussed so far is what part do you think that the new parties or the smaller parties will play rather than just the two majors or with the Greens and the Coalition going forward? We've got a ridiculous amount of spend from the United Australia Party on advertising. We've got Pauline Hanson up in Queensland that seems to be gathering. How much do you think that maybe a protest vote where people have gone, you know what, they're both as bad as each other, I can't tell the difference between the two of them, and I just want to poke a finger in the eye of the establishment and give my vote to somebody else? Do you think that will play a part?
Being one of them myself,
sorry, John.
I think that'll play out differently in every state. To be frank, something that Ryan said a few weeks ago, which is true, that the pandemic or the lockdown moving on has taken a lot of oxygen from them. That's got to be a fact. That was played out in South Australia. So the minor parties did very badly in South Australia. And you've got SA Best in South Australia, Nick Xenophon's hangover, we'll call it, went from 20% of the vote to 1%. Queensland, just for the Liberal Democrats, they've got Campbell Newman rampaging, and so that'll get some lift there. And Victoria, the odour of the lockdowns is still there. So, yeah, I can detect that there's a potential to vote for minor parties there.
An extension of the state of emergency, right, in Victoria. I don't know for this, yes.
The interesting thing for me, I mean, UAP, you're right, that they're throwing a stack of money at the federal campaign. But as I said before, you can vote for the UAP, for example, because you don't like either parties. But, we talk about Albanese not having a vision for the future. I mean, what's the UAP's vision for the future? They might be a protest vote, but you're voting. What are you voting for? I know nothing about their education policy, infrastructure policy, health policy. You can throw your vote at those people to protest, but at the end of the day, who are you putting into Parliament and what's their agenda? If their agenda is just anti-Liberal and Labor, that doesn't take us very far forward as a nation.
And I think the voting public has had concerns about hung parliaments in the past. So, I'm not sure that the minor parties are going to get the traction that they probably deserve. I think it's going to come down to the individual candidate in the various electoral areas. But I think as a whole, the Australian public doesn't want to go down the path of that hung parliament where decisions are made by the few. But because there is no differentiation, because people are disillusioned by both of the major parties, that is inevitably going to put the power in the hands of the few in Parliament, and that the few will be the minor parties that.
I got to jump. Sorry.
There, anyway, we've all got to go. Thanks so much for your time, team, and speak next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
I did want to say something about Bill Shorten, though.
Yeah. Yes,
I personally cannot stand the man, and I am concerned that he's on an easy trajectory to being Prime Minister. So I thought that was a bloody good question. So we could spend a whole session talking about how much we hate.